A mad scientist has kidnapped your girlfriend, and if no one saves her, she will soon be less one brain. What would you do? This is the premise of Lucasfilm Games' Maniac Mansion that first appeared on the Commodore 64 and Apple II before being ported to the Nintendo Entertainment System, among other platforms, in the early 90s. Growing up, I loved all the odd point-and-click adventure games that I could get my hands on. Whilst these games tended to be more prolific on the PC, other than the times I was able to play them at a family friend's house, I often got my fix from console ports and releases. The first, however, was Maniac Mansion, and despite its flaws, it still holds a special place in my heart to this day. For the purposes of this review, I played the NES version. The game opens 20 years in the past on a starry night overlooking rolling hills. Suddenly, a meteor sweeps through the sky, landing in the fields outside a large mansion, causing a flurry of activity as the residents all scurry in a confused scramble to make sense of what just happened. As a kid, I thought this was a brilliant introduction to the game as the lights in the mansion windows turned on in time to the beat of the main theme. With no introduction other than the scrolling, oozing logo with a chainsaw carved into its flesh, we are dropped directly onto the character select screen. From here, we must choose whom of the 7 protagonists that we want to begin the game with, though unfortunately, one of them, Dave, is mandatory. Before we move on to selecting our other 2 characters, let me give you a little exposition on the story. In the 20 years since the strange meteor crashed into the fields outside the mansion, the head of the household, Dr. Fred Edison, has been acting rather strangely. Rumours abound that people are being abducted and never heard from again. Our story begins as Dave's girlfriend, Sandy Pantz, I mean, if you're going to have sex on the beach, you need to deal with those consequences, girl, is abducted and will soon share the fate of the other missing people. Unfortunately, it seems like the police have their hands full practicing acts of brutality on civilians, so it's up to Dave to form a rescue party from his group of friends, enter the mansion, and save his girl before her pretty brains get sucked out, removed. I enjoyed that the characters all have their own strengths, which in turn determines how the puzzles within the game must be solved. Whilst Dave is the leader and doesn't have any particular skill to speak of, other than being a distraction, the other characters can help him in a variety of ways. Besides Dave, from left to right we have Razor, the lead singer of a band, Bernard, a geek, Sid, an aspiring musician, Wendy, a hopeful novelist, Jeff, a beach bum, and Michael, a photographer for the college newspaper. Who we choose will decide how we can finish the game, though each combination does have a viable solution. What I liked most about the selection of characters is the diversity that's presented. Of the 7 members, 2 are women, and 1 is a person of colour, which was quite revolutionary for the time amidst plumbers saving princesses and people of colour being near non-existent or relegated to the role of a thug or criminal. For my venture through Maniac Mansion, I chose Bernard because nerds are cool, and Jeff for, whilst he doesn't have any special skills to mention, he's just so zen, and you can chill out to his non-intrusive theme song. Of course, we also need to take Dave, the average Joe, who didn't serve any purpose in my playthrough other than being locked in the basement and given the task of releasing the other kids who also inevitably found their way into the Edison family's kink dungeon. What a selfless person Dave is! The game begins with our 3 chosen heroes standing in the driveway of 2787 Cemetery Lane, except rather than about to mount a brave rescue, they look more like they're ready to head to the nearest Star Trek convention. Equipped with just their CD players and over-brimming teenage enthusiasm, they're prepared to face whatever horrors await them within the mansion. Except for Bernard, he's just a tuna head. Maniac Mansion uses the script creation utility for Maniac Mansion, or SCUMM for short, engine, which begets a command parser in favour of a set of verbs that must be chosen and combined with objects on the screen to produce different results and solve puzzles. I do think that the 11 verbs are a bit much, with some of them being superfluous and could have easily been simplified, not to mention that there is no examine function, which I would have appreciated, as the opportunity to present some nice flavor text to the player would have been very welcomed. If I were to modify anything, I'd get rid of the go-to command entirely, and make it so that pressing B, for example, cancels whatever verb you've selected, changing the cursor into a movement indicator instead. Additionally, open and close could have been bundled into use, but I guess there is such a thing as me being a bit too pedantic. After solving a rather easy puzzle that involves finding the key to the front door, our heroes finally step over the threshold into the mansion. Within each room, as the kids explore, they can find a variety of objects that can be picked up or interacted with. To beat the game, we need to find the correct item combinations for puzzles that will allow us access to the secret lab of Dr. Fred Edison and ultimately save Sandy Pants. This is no easy task, however, as within the mansion you will inevitably encounter some of its inhabitants. For example, should Dave decide to walk into the kitchen, he'll encounter Nurse Edna looking for a midnight snack. Mayhap Dave will satiate her appetite. It is possible to outrun her, and I have done it before, but unfortunately Dave got caught this time around and spent the entire game staring at the dungeon wall, contemplating the meaning of his existence. And who knows what Nurse Edna did to him. In addition to Edna, the family son Weird Ed can also be encountered and is the only person in the household that seems to know just what's going on, but as you are trespassing in his home, he'll also throw you in the dungeon, unless you steal his hamster or package and give them back to him. Finally, who needs a cat or a dog when you have disembodied tentacles, one green and one purple, that will inhibit your progress unless you can manage to appease or distract them? The mansion itself is alive with such character and defined rooms that make it easy to navigate without fear of getting lost. One thing I didn't like about the first Clock Tower game was that every corridor looked the same. You don't need to be worried about that here, as each location has different colour palettes and superior interior design that makes it easy to memorize the mansion layout. One thing I would note that was annoying about the layout of the mansion though, is that a lot of the puzzles have items that are spread far apart, meaning you'll be walking up and down a lot of flights of stairs in order to complete your mission. Whilst exploring the mansion, sometimes the scene will change to that of the antagonists, giving you a little information on what they are up to, or maybe where they are in the mansion. Coined as cutscenes by producer Ron Gilbert, in addition to telling the game's story, these can also possibly give you a hint on what to do next if you are stuck. I thought this was an interesting way for the game to tell its story, although these scenes could sometimes be a little intrusive, especially when you were in the middle of solving a puzzle. Speaking of being called a cutscene, to this day, this term has persisted in the game development industry to describe any scene within a game that provides information to the player in a way that develops the story. Maniac Mansion is played entirely with the mouse cursor that is controlled using the NES controller. Sometimes this can be problematic, as I found that when I was in a hurry, I would often click on the incorrect verb, which would result in a negative. However, in situations where I wasn't panicking, I felt that the game controlled fine. The puzzles are generally intuitive and inventory based. For example, using paint remover on a painted over door. You are not punished heavily for experimentation either, which seemed to be very problematic in earlier games from competitor Sierra Entertainment. That's not to say that Maniac Mansion doesn't have problems, as you can kill your characters, which inhibits the ability to beat the game, or blow up the entire mansion, which leads to an instant game over. If you do need to restart the game, it can be completed within 2 hours, so it's not a big deal if you have to start from the beginning. Besides, the NES version also has the option to save, so it's possible to prevent yourself from getting into a sticky situation. Due to the graphical capabilities of the NES being 256 by 240 pixels, the graphics were downscaled from the original game release to accommodate the system hardware. Additionally, due to Nintendo's harsh censorship laws that existed at the time of the game's release, some of the graphics needed to be altered or omitted entirely to be published on the platform. Anything that could be considered violent or sexually suggestive was altered or removed. For example, in Dead Cousin Ted's bathroom, the writing on the wall reads, "Call Edna." However, in the original version the text read, "For a good time call Edna." and calling her would result in her questioning if it was a prank phone call she was receiving, stating that she can't hear heavy breathing, then offering to show how it's done. But I guess Dave knows all about this by now. One of the strengths of the NES version of Maniac Mansion over the original title is that due to the NES requiring all games to have music, a soundtrack needed to be produced which wasn't present in the original game. In addition to the main theme of the game, each character was given their own track which can be played via the kids' CD players, or turned off if the music became too intrusive. I'm looking at you, Razor. When I was a kid, I enjoyed that your character's selection determined what tracks you'd be able to hear on your playthrough. Of course, you can sample all tracks by clicking on a character's portrait on the character selection screen, so I never got surprised with music I didn't like. Maniac Mansion is a genre-defining game that needs to be experienced by all point-and-click adventure enthusiasts. Whilst the game presents the SCUMM engine in its earliest form, and there are bound to be some hiccups encountered with it, it's a great place to start your adventure through LucasArts Games titles, as it can only get better from here. The diverse cast of characters made it easy to select the ones you either identified with or were interested in, and based on your choice granted a different experience with each playthrough. Whilst the game does have some dead ends, it is quite short and easy to pick up and play within a couple of hours. If you've never played Maniac Mansion before, you're doing yourself a great disservice. Get it now, any way you can. By the way, I'm often interested in how minorities are presented within video games, particularly looking at how classic titles inform later games, such as how Metroid's Samus was actually a woman. As Maniac Mansion presents a person of colour as someone you can select for your team, I'm interested to know what you think of him in terms of promoting diversity. Do you think he is a positive role model for representing a minority in Maniac Mansion? Do you have any other examples of minorities presented in a positive way in games? I'd love to hear about it in the comments. This has been Venoir presenting to you a review of Maniac Mansion. If you enjoyed my review, please like, subscribe and comment, as it helps me out a bunch. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye bye for now.